this be a thumbnail? Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kendra and this is Balanced Skein, where I talk about all things yarny related. Today I wanted to bring a bit of a different video and share with you 9 cardigan patterns that I want to make. So I know you may be thinking, cardigans? It's basically summer. Like, why? And to that I would respond, because I want to, that's why. But the longer answer is, I really like cardigans. And you know what, it's a shame because as much as I like cardigans, I have not knit many. I've only knit 2 for myself, and I've knit 3 as gifts for other people. So I feel like my wardrobe is kind of lacking what I would consider a pretty essential element of a cardigan. Now, I have several store-bought cardigans. I don't particularly love any of them, but they serve a purpose. And I think cardigans are really functional for a number of reasons. It's a great type of layering piece, outfit topper, in the transitional months where it's not super hot but it's not super cold. They serve really well as an outerwear piece, especially if it's made out of wool. And for me, what I'm learning the more garments I knit is that I appreciate a cardigan, especially with worsted weight yarn. I run hot, generally speaking. If other people in the room are cold, chances are I'm comfortable. If other people in the room are comfortable, chances are I'm hot, I'm overheating. So in general, you know, I try to keep things light, which is why I find myself gravitating more towards sport and fingering weight for pullover style garments. But I appreciate the satisfaction of knitting a piece with worsted weight yarn. But I kind of feel like worsted weight and above for me in a pullover style garment is just a recipe for me to overheat. And I think the challenge with pullover style sweaters is that if you get too hot, you can't just pull off your sweater unless you have a presentable under piece like a tank top or short sleeve t-shirt that you wouldn't mind the world seeing. Whereas a cardigan is like, if you can wear it open for one, which makes it a lot easier to be ventilated while wearing it. But you also have, and depending on the pattern, the option of buttoning it up if it does get too cool. And you're most likely, when wearing a cardigan, layering it over a piece that you would feel comfortable wearing as an individual piece. So for that reason, I think they're a lot more versatile to wear. And especially for me, who I run hot. So a worsted weight pullover for me is maybe not the most wearable piece, but a worsted weight cardigan could be infinitely wearable for me. So I've wanted to make more cardigans. It's just that pullovers have taken precedent the past year or 2 of my knitting journey. Again, I've knit a couple for myself, but more pullovers than cardigans, and I would like to change that in the near future if possible. And so I think they can be worn year-round, and I think they can be styled a lot more easily than some pullovers. And I just am having a moment where I really appreciate a good cardigan. So I've been doing some independent research on Ravelry to find some patterns that I really like, and I want to share some of my favorites with you guys. So this list is sort of separated into 3 different categories. The first category is buttoned cardigans. So cardigans that have a traditional button band of some sort, and oh, I thought that was a coyote. So cardigans with a button band and buttons that you have the option of closing or wearing open. The next section will be open cardigans that are constructed without any type of buttons or closure option. And then the third category are going to be outdoor cardigans that I would make for myself to wear more as a jacket to wear outdoors as opposed to a cardigan to wear indoors. So those are the three categories. So starting with buttoned cardigans, the first pattern on this list that I wanted to talk about is the truss cardigan. So this is a pattern by Melissa Worley. It is a worsted weight pattern. It's published in Brooklyn Tweed, and it is a drop shoulder seamed cardigan. The ribbings for the right front, back, and left front are worked separately from the bottom up. Then all three sections are then joined together and the body is worked flat in one piece to the armholes, forming side slits where the separated ribbings were joined. And the body is then divided for the right front, back, and left front and worked separately to the shoulders. The sleeves are worked flat and sewn into the armholes. The collar and front bands are picked up and worked after the garment is assembled. So there's some seaming involved, but the entire piece isn't seamed because the body is knit in one single piece from the bottom up. This pattern has been on my list for a while. I love the look of it. I love the geometric diagonal lines with the bottom ribbing. I like the eyelet detail. I think it's a really simple yet effective design. I think one thing that has put me off from making this cardigan so far has been the fact that it is seamed. I found this cardigan much earlier in my knitting journey, and I more or less decided that I wanted to make it someday. But as it happens, you know, the newer patterns, the shinier patterns, the hot new releases kind of caught my attention and pushed this pattern off my radar until pretty recently. Julie Makes Over on Instagram finished her version and posted about it, and I fell in love with it all over again. So it is, for the time being, back at the top of my mind, and I still like it just as much as I did when I first discovered the pattern. And I have some Cascade 220 in my stash that could work for this. I don't know when I'll get around to knitting this pattern, but I can definitely say that I want to knit this pattern. So the second pattern in this list is the quintessential cardigan. This pattern was published by Church Mouse Yarns and Tees. It is a DK weight pattern, and it is another pattern with a seamed construction. It says, a timeless little hip length cardi always manages to look modern. Ours has classic details. Stop, Leo. A pretty jeweled neckline, knit along button bands, full or bracelet length sleeves, all of which are clearly and expertly described in written instructions and quick guides. I've knit this pattern once before as a gift for my mom, and I had a great experience with it. It really is a basic cardigan. There's nothing that visually stands out about the design, but it is very well constructed, and I think a lot of that does come down to the fact that it is seamed. Now, don't get me wrong, seaming is a lot more work than knitting the same piece seamless, but there's something to be said for the integrity of the construction and just having that extra skill in your toolbox, in your knitting toolbox. I think it's a true basic. It's very easy to style, and I feel like this, or something that looks like this pattern, you would find on the rack at like your department stores. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think those are the type of pieces we kind of need depending on what your lifestyle is. We need to popularize the basics again. I love a good cable moment. I love a good, you know, unique and different silhouette, but we all need basics, even if they're not as exciting to knit. And this cardigan actually reminds me of the cardigans that I would wear in grammar school, or as we call it in my city, grade school. When I was in grade school, I went to a Catholic grade school, and our uniforms were doo-doo plaid I'm not joking, doo-doo brown plaid with thin yellow stripes and a white collared shirt. And we had the option of layering over a doo-doo brown cardigan. And the cardigan that I would always get has a similar look to this cardigan. So when I see this, I always think about that. I would not be knitting it in doo-doo brown. I've already knit my doo-doo brown cardigan, so I've got that out of my system, but it's just a fun thing that I thought I would share. So we'll see when or if I get around to actually making this, but it definitely appeals to me and I would love to make it someday. Next in the buttoned cardigan category is the Sarah cardigan. So this is a pattern by Julie Weisenberger. It is a DK weight pattern and it is a drop shoulder design. I really love the diagonal line of stitches that goes down the back of the shoulder. I've seen a lot of patterns with this detail and I think it looks really polished. So I'm always drawn to patterns that have that detail. And I definitely think this is another type of piece that you would be able to buy off the rack. In fact, I have a store-bought cardigan. It's either from Gap or Old Navy that is almost identical to this cardigan. And when I bought it, I was aware of this existence of this pattern, but I needed a cardigan and I didn't have time to knit the cardigan I needed. I did look on Ravelry, as one does. Upon my perusing, I saw that someone made a color blocked version. That color blocked version was really cool and got the wheels turning for me. And I think I would love to make, I'm a fan of color blocking in general. I just haven't knit any color block projects. I think once I'm on the other side of this no buy for the year, and I have a bunch of leftover odd quantities, I'll throw something together and come up with some type of color block, something. But I thought her version was really cool, so I figured I would highlight that. But yeah, I really like this cardigan. Okay, so the last button cardigan I'll talk about is called Wordy. So Wordy is a pattern by Isolde Teague, the same designer who designed the Musselburgh hat, which is incredibly popular. I've made a couple myself. So this is another drop shoulder cardigan. It is fingering weight, which is a commitment, but I think it would be worth it. And what I really like about this pattern is the pockets. They're really simple, but I love that they're slanted and sort of invisible on the outside, as opposed to a patch pocket that is not as subtle. I like the subtlety of the pockets in this cardigan. And if you scroll through the pattern pictures, there are several different versions. It includes instructions on how to knit it unbuttoned and instructions on how to knit it with a button band. And I think having those types of customizations written into a pattern is really appealing to me, because as much as I like to knit, sometimes I cannot fill in the blanks of my imagination. Sometimes I just want the pattern to tell me exactly what to do to achieve the look in the picture, because the picture is what drew me to the pattern in the first place. And I appreciate patterns that have sort of modifications written into the pattern itself to kind of guide you through that. This is a classic long line cardigan with a deep V-neck and cozy pockets. The back and front are worked separately from the bottom up, which gives structure and allows 2 layers to be worked on the fronts for neatly constructed pockets. The wide relaxed fit shoulders are an extended version of, they use an extended version of the English tailoring with all of the shaping at the back. The style is somewhere between a set-in and drop shoulder with a very shallow sleeve caps. The sleeves are worked flat from the top down, from stitches picked up around the armhole. The 2 layers of the front pockets are joined by seaming them to the back and separately worked button band as one. But yeah, I think it's another basic. I would put this in the same sort of use case as the quintessential cardigan, the DK weight all stockinette seamed cardigan from before. But again, it has the added instructions to customize the type of button band. I like that it has pockets, and I like the style of pockets that are included. I really like it. And I like that it's finger and weight. Like, even though finger and weight garments are inevitably more knitting, I like fingering weight fabric. Like I said, I run hot. I don't really like something super heavy and stifling. And so I think a cardigan and fingering weight would be really wearable for me, especially in like the spring and summer. So yeah, that is Wardy. So let's move on to a list of open cardigans. The open cardigans that I've seen tend to have a more relaxed silhouette. I wear my cardigans open pretty much exclusively. I can't remember, actually no, the store-bought cardigan I mentioned before, I sometimes wear that buttoned, but that's the only cardigan I wear buttoned, but it's not the only buttoned cardigan I own. But my point is that 9 times out of 10, if I'm wearing a cardigan, even if it has buttons, I'm wearing it open. So from a knitting experience perspective, I don't like picking up stitches. I don't like sewing on buttons. And I don't even like wearing cardigans buttoned. So for me, these open cardigans feel like a more natural thing to knit. I think it makes more sense. Like, I'm not gonna work more to knit a buttoned cardigan if I'm not going to button it. Does that make sense? Like, it's one thing to buy it off the rack, but when a button band, functional buttonholes, and sewing on buttons translate to additional time put into a piece, and I'm not even gonna use the buttons for their functional purpose, count me out. So I really love a good open cardigan moment for that reason. So the first cardigan in this category is the Woodford's cardigan by Elizabeth Doherty. This is another fingering weight pattern. It's published in Brooklyn Tweed, and it is another drop shoulder style cardigan. It's worked from the top down. Short rows are used throughout the design to shape the fabric. The design begins with a cast on for the upper back, and then shoulder stitches are picked up along the cast on edge. This piece has a really striking effect. I love the multiple different textures. I love that the construction is unique. At some points you're picking up stitches, you have short row shaping, and I believe there's an A-line. Yeah, and there's also shaping to provide an A-line shape towards the bottom of the cardigan, which just means that there's a subtle flare at the bottom of the cardigan, which is a shape that has always intrigued me as someone with hips. But overall, this I feel like is a pattern from a knitting perspective that will keep me really interested, especially since it's fingering weight. To be lost in an ocean of stocking net and fingering weight is kind of maddening, I can imagine. So I appreciate that there are multiple different textures going on here and that the construction keeps you engaged throughout the entire project. So that's the Woodfords. Next in the open cardigan category, we have Calderon. I'm actually not entirely sure how to pronounce that. Calderon.
Do we have the correct pronunciation of your name?
This is another drop shoulder pattern. I think the overall silhouette is pretty similar to the Woodfords that I shared previously. And I really like that the all over, there's again some all over texture here. This one has some 3/4 length sleeves, which is interesting. I think I would probably prefer longer sleeves, but I'm not opposed to trying a 3/4 lengths. It's not something I've ever knit before. The Calderon cardigan is worked flat in one piece to the armholes. Then back and front are worked separately to the shoulder. The sleeves are worked circularly from the bottom up and sewn to the body. So yeah, I really like the look of this cardigan and I would definitely wear it. I like the shaping along the front of the collar. It's a V-neck kind of, but The shaping is so subtle that it's not super obvious. And I just like little details like that. I also like that the crop shape and the shorter sleeves. Again, I've never done 3/4 length sleeves, but this pattern really appeals to me. And I think if I knit it, I would include that design element as well to stay true to the pattern. Also really like how wide the body is. There's a lot of positive ease in the body, and I think it just adds to the coziness factor of this piece. So yeah, I would definitely wear something like this. Okay, next up in open cardigans is the Grand cardigan. So this is a pattern by Emily Green. It is a bulky weight pattern. The entire piece is some form of stockinette or reverse stockinette, which is really unique. None of the other patterns in this list have that feature, and it really appealed to me because it just looks like the ultimate cozy cardigan. And I also like that it is seamed, but it's not just your basic seam cardigan. If you look closely, you'll see that several elements of the pattern are knit in different directions, horizontally or vertically, and it just makes me wonder, how is this actually constructed? Because it looks like some interesting things are going on. I think this is probably a bit more of an advanced pattern. I don't know how well I would be able to execute something like this, but I really like the way it looks, which is why it's on this list. Grand is a minimal cardigan coat featuring deep front pockets, an oversized fit, and delightfully substantial double knit trims. This pattern pairs inventive construction and finishing techniques with just the right amount of relaxing stockinette knitting, offering an engaging project with stunning finished results. And I couldn't agree with that more. The results are stunning, which is why this pattern appeals to me so much. What doesn't appeal to me is the yarn that it's knit in. Not to say that Woolfolk Luft isn't nice, but Woolfolk Luft is expensive. For the size that I would want to knit for myself, which is the 3rd size, I would need to buy, I believe, 17 balls of yarn, which is like $330 worth of Woolfolk Luft. And I think the challenge with it is that I'm not aware of a lot of comparable alternatives to Woolfolk Luft. It is one of those blown yarns. It's super light and lofty and airy, but yet it does knit up at a bulky gauge. So I think the benefit is that you can knit something super cozy and oversized like this, and it'll keep you warm, but it won't be so heavy that it feels like you're wearing a winter coat, if that makes sense. And so if I were to get a bulky yarn that I was able to knit up at the gauge for this pattern, yes, I can make it, but I'm sure it'll be 3 times as heavy as if I were to knit it with the Woolfolk Luft. So that's really it. It's not very accessible in the sense that the yarn that it's designed with is so expensive. That's just something to think about. So yeah, as striking as this pattern is, and as much as I like it, it's not that popular. There's not a lot of projects on Ravelry for this pattern, and if I had to guess, it would be because the yarn it's designed in is so expensive and there's not a lot of comparable alternatives on the market, and the sizing isn't great, so a lot of people just simply can't knit it. So, but I think that doesn't reflect so much on Emily Green, the designer, which is a designer I really like. I like a lot of her patterns, but more so that she was probably had to fit her design within the parameters that Woolfolk needed for their publications, which is totally understandable. So that's just something to think about. Maybe one day I will, when I'm feeling fancy and reckless, I'll treat myself to $330 worth of Woolfolk Luft so I can make this pattern for myself. But until then, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, but I do like it, which is why it's on this list. All right, the third and final category on this list is jackets, or cardigans that I would wear as jackets. The first in this category is the Nature's Cardigan by Ozetta. This is an Aran weight drop shoulder cardigan with a really cool button band. That is what really appeals to me about this pattern. I can picture myself like walking my dog on a crisp fall morning in this cardigan. I think it's really looks nice, and I think it would be a functional piece as outerwear in the milder months. What intrigues me about it is the button band. It looks like it's just stockinette that goes all the way to the edge. I don't know how that's achieved or if there's something special done with the back of that fabric for the button band, but I do like the way it looks a lot. And I like the pockets. They're nice and roomy, so they would hold my dog's poop bags and my phone and my keys. It says the Nature's cardigan is a classic inspired design with drop shoulders that create a loose and boxy shape. It has a folded neck and features oversized pockets. When it came to compiling this list, I was on the fence between this pattern and the Miles shirt jacket from the same designer. The reason I like this pattern better is, as I mentioned before, the button band is really cool. I like that I don't have to pick up stitches to knit a button band, that it is knit with the main body of the cardigan. Love that. As opposed to the Miles shirt jacket, which features a traditional button band that you pick up perpendicular to the main fabric and knit a ribbed strip of fabric with the button holes. So I've done that before several times. Not my favorite process. Picking up stitches in general is not something I enjoy. So for that reason, the Nature's cardigan appeals to me more. But the second reason I picked the Nature's cardigan is that the curved hem on the Miles shirt jacket is cute, it's cool, but I think it's a bit too trendy in the sense that a year or two from now, I wouldn't enjoy wearing that. In fact, now I wouldn't enjoy wearing it. I'm not someone who follows trends, but I noticed them, and in my mind, this is like a little bit too niche of a trend. The whole shirt jacket with the tails and the curving on the bottom hem. I don't know how long that trend is gonna stick around. Add to that the fact that I'm just generally not a fan of how that looks. I much prefer the bottom of the Nature's cardigan. Last but not least on this list is another pattern from Emily Green, and it is the pitch coat. This is a worsted weight all over textured cable piece. It is 100% seamed, and I've been in love with this cardigan since like 2020 when I first started knitting. And when I first found out about the pattern, I really liked it, but I didn't feel confident enough in my knitting skills to actually make it. I said this in previous videos, but this is like my knitting Mount Everest project. Like, this is like, if I make this, I'm a knitter with a capital K. Not only is it seamed, which for so long scared me away from knitting patterns, but it's also cabled all over, which at one point in my knitting journey, I didn't know how to do. And so those are the two main techniques featured in this pattern, and it really felt like it would be an impossible feat for me to knit it. Fast forward to now, I like seamed garments. I love a good cable moment. I know how to do both. I really don't have anything holding me back from knitting this pattern anymore. I even have the yarn to make it. So by mid-October, I will have knit this pattern. I'm saying that to hold myself accountable because I had planned to knit it last year and the time got away from me, but this year I would love to have this to be able to wear this coming fall and winter. I love that it is long but not necessarily oversized. It has a slim silhouette. I love the pockets, and I feel like this is something I could wear as a jacket on my commute to work in the early fall and late spring, or early fall and early spring. Honestly, if anything, this is just gonna be an ego knit. Like, I wouldn't make this to just be able to say I made it, and to make the knitting Kendra from 2 years ago super proud and excited. That's it. That's every item on the list. Those are 9 cardigans that I would love to make. Let me know if you have heard of any of them, or if you now want to make some of the cardigans that I shared with you today. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.